We're going to start today with a video. So, you're going to have to catch up to what I've seen here and what I've watched about the Stanford experiment. I want you guys to really watch this, and then we're going to get together and talk about it as a group, because, this sheeple mentality of law enforcers. People say law enforcers, and I say, why are you saying law enforcers? When you give somebody a title or a recognition, sergeant, lieutenant, they have their platoons they check into. They call them platoons. It's a horrible thing. It's absolutely atrocious. So we have to change the mentality, but it starts with understanding that you're programmed. You've been programmed, and the Stanford experiment is a perfect example of how you have been programmed. And so just watch a little bit of this. We may not watch it all, but I want you to watch it.
One of the most infamous psychological studies ever conducted was the Stanford prison experiment. It's mentioned in almost every intro to psychology textbook. They tend to focus on how unethical it was and are less critical of its supposed conclusion. August 14th, 1971, Palo Alto, California. 12 young men are rounded up from their homes by police, placed under arrest, and brought to a makeshift prison in the basement of Stanford University. It all begins as a study on the psychology of prison life, led by Stanford psychology professor Dr. Philip Zimbardo. 24 volunteers, 12 guards, and 12 prisoners have agreed to spend the next 2 weeks recreating life in a correctional facility.
This is unbelievable. They took my clothes. Hands off the door.
The prisoners are booked and stripped nude. They're no longer individuals, forced to wear smocks, stocking caps, and shackles, identified only by their prisoner numbers.
It evolved into a confrontation, the guard showing the prisoners who's boss.
Yeah.
The guards quickly adapt to their new profession. Given anonymity by their mirrored sunglasses, some of them start to control the meager food rations, restrict prisoners' bathroom use, and as tensions rise, so do their cruel methods. Within just 6 days of the planned 2-week study, conditions are so bad that the entire operation is shut down.
I'm inside! Out! Now! Damn it!
The study makes international headlines. Zimbardo's fame skyrockets, and his conclusions are taught to students worldwide, used as a defense in criminal trials, and are even submitted to Congress to explain the abuses inflicted at Abu Ghraib. The study brings up a question just as important then as it is today. Is evil caused by the environment or the personalities in it? Zimbardo's shocking conclusion is that when people feel anonymous and have power over depersonalized others, they can easily become evil, and it occurs more often than we'd like to admit. But while it's true that people were mean to each other during the Stanford prison experiment, what if what truly caused that behavior wasn't what we've always been told? The Stanford prison experiment has always had its controversies, but a wave of recent revelations have pushed it back into the spotlight 47 years later. Today, I'm going to speak with journalist Ben Blum, whose recent writings have brought criticism of the experiment to a larger audience than ever before. How did you get involved in the Stanford prison experiment in the first place?
Well, my involvement was quite personal. Like everyone, I had kind of absorbed the basic lesson of the experiment through the cultural ether. And then my cousin Alex was arrested for bank robbery. This was a team of mostly military guys with AK-47s. Alex was the driver. He was a 19-year-old U.S. Army Ranger, and it was a superior of his in the Rangers that organized and led the bank robbery. Alex thought the whole thing was a training exercise. He was just so brainwashed in this intense Ranger training that when a superior proposed this bank robbery, he took it as just one more kind of tactical thought experiment. Then Dr. Philip Zimbardo participated in his legal defense. Zimbardo submits a letter to the court advocating leniency and sentencing on the grounds that Alex, my cousin, had been so transformed by the social environment of the Ranger Battalion that he participated in the bank robbery without exercising his own free will.
Well, how did that affect Alex's sentencing?
He received an extraordinarily lenient sentence of 16 months. So Zimbardo was a family hero. But over time, Alex finally, he did admit to me, you know what, I knew this was a bank robbery by the end. I just didn't have the moral courage to back out.
Oh, wow.
Alex, myself, and our whole family came to view the Zimbardo argument as a way to shirk personal culpability and to put all the blame on the situation.
So you start looking at the Stanford prison experiment in particular. You reached out to Dr. Zimbardo himself, as well as some of those who participated. What'd you learn?
I learned to my deep surprise that quite a number of the participants had stories of their experience that completely contradicted the official narrative.
Which is, look, these regular people, good people came together and because of the situation became evil.
Right. Zimbardo has claimed that the guards were put in the situation and then the kind of hidden wellspring of sadism that apparently lies in all of us unfolded organically.
On day 2, there was a very sharp change in the whole nature of what was happening in that prison. The guards now fell into their job.
There was an orientation meeting for the guards. They had been told quite explicitly to oppress the prisoners. That falls under the heading of what psychologists call demand characteristics. Experimental subjects tend to be motivated to give experimenters what they want.
Demand characteristics occur whenever participants being studied act differently than they normally would because they've guessed what hypothesis is being tested and feel that a certain kind of behavior is being demanded.
There was a recording of explicitly correcting a guard who wasn't being tough enough.
The guards have to know that every guard is going to be what we call a tough guard. And so far, well, you have to kind of try and get it in you.
What did they tell you? More training. And at the training, throughout all the commissions, it repeatedly says that all police believe a certain amount of violence is just necessary.
Sure or not, we can make this thing seem like a prison, which is the aim of the thing. Depends largely on the guard's behavior.
So a conclusion you could make from the Stanford prison experiment is that when you tell people to be cruel, they'll do it if you tell them it's for a greater good like science.
Right.
Who would have thought?
I think the study stands still as a fascinating spur to further more careful research, as a demonstration that should make anyone curious as to how such extreme behavior could arise in such a short time.
The experiment could still be useful, but it might need to be reinterpreted. Its data might lead to different conclusions than the one that we've been telling for so many decades.
Oh no, man, we've seen it. They call themselves enforcers, and we are what they want to arrest. We are what they want to attack. They set up ways to put us in a dungeon.
Right.
The flaws in the experiment that Ben and other critics bring up call into question large portions of the narrative surrounding the study. So I want to hear from someone who was actually there.
Come on. Get in that closet there. All I'm saying, you're going to be in there for a while. So just get used to it.
Dave Eshelman, the study's most infamous guard, agreed to tell me his side of the story. It's really an honor to meet you. You're a living, walking piece of psychology history.
I'm never recognized in the street or anything like that, although I still get some hate mail. But
Are you serious?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what do you say to them when they react that way?
I say, well, there's probably a lot about that didn't happen quite the way it's been portrayed.
Well, Dave, before we go too far, I'd like to watch the footage we have here so we can kind of talk about what we see.
That's me there, by the way.
Look at that look.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you get involved with a Stanford prison experiment.
My father is a professor.
I mean, he says, look at that look. Isn't that what they look like today? Isn't that what the coppers look like? You know, remember, this is their take on some things, and we're going to talk about it.
Get involved with a Stanford prison experiment.
My father is a professor at Stanford, and I was home for summer looking for a summer job. So I'm looking through the want ads, $15 a day. You know, in 1971, that wasn't bad. The way it was introduced to the guards, the whole concept of this experiment, we were never led to believe that we were part of the experiment. We were led to believe that our job was to get results from the prisoners, that they were the ones that researchers are really studying. The researchers were behind the wall, and we all knew they were filming, and we can often hear the researchers commenting on the action from the other side of the wall. You know, like, oh gosh, did you see that? Here, let's make sure you get a close-up of that, okay? So if they want to show that prison is a bad experience, I'm going to make it bad.
But how did you feel doing stuff like that? Didn't you feel bad?
I don't know if this is a revelation to you, but 18-year-old boys are not the most sensitive creatures.
Sure.
My agenda was to be the worst guard I could possibly be.
And it's pretty serious.
Mm-hmm.
It harms me. I mean, harms. I mean, in the present tense, it harms me. How did it harm you?
This is my favorite part of all the footage we have from the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
It's you and a prisoner confronting each other after the experiment.
I remember the guy saying, I hate you, man.
Yeah.
I hate you.
How does it harm you? Just to think about it, you mean that people can be like that? Yeah. It let me in on some knowledge that I've never experienced firsthand. I didn't see where it was really harmful. It was degrading, and that was part of my particular little experiment to see how I could. Your particular little experiment. Yes, why don't you tell me about that? I was running little experiments of my own.
Each day I said, well, what can we do to ramp up what we did yesterday? How can we build on that?
Why did you want to ramp things up?
Two reasons, I think. One was because I really believed I was helping the researchers.
Bullshit. Because he had absolute power over the subjects.
With some better understanding of human behavior. On the other hand, it was personally interesting to me. You know, I cannot say that I, did not enjoy what I was doing. Maybe, having so much power over these poor defenseless prisoners, maybe, you kind of get off on that a little bit.
You weren't entirely following a script from a director.
Right.
But you also felt like Zimbardo wanted something from you.
Yes.
And you gave that to him.
I believe I did. I think I decided I was going to do a better job than anybody there of delivering what he wanted. But does that excuse me from what I was doing? Certainly it started out with me playing a role. So the question is, was there a point where I stopped acting and I started living, so to speak?
The standard narrative is that Dave Eshelman did what he did because when people are given power, it's easier than we think for abuse to happen. That may be true, but how predisposed to aggression was Dave? I mean, he signed up to something called a prison study, after all. Also, his feeling that cruelty was encouraged and helped the experiment may have affected his behavior. What I'd like to see is, in the absence of outside influence, can anonymity, power, and depersonalization alone lead to evil? To answer that question.
So actually, there's another study by a Russian scientist that I can show you. The things that he just said, when you give an entire group anonymity, when you give them absolute power, it's almost 1,000% they'll abuse it.
I'd like to design a demonstration of my own. So I'm meeting with Dr. Jared Bartles of William Jewell College.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody has ideas, God bless them. So, it's just pretty apparent that when you start to really get into it, that when you just give someone power, you give someone power over you, that they'll abuse it. In old people's homes, when the caretakers get 100% power over the elderly, these people who become caretakers certainly don't sign up to be caretakers to be abusive to elderly people. Nobody here, put a 1 in the chat if you don't think health workers sign up so they can beat old people. I mean, I'm sure there's some sadists within that particular industry, but no. And so you start to go, well, if they'll abuse elderly people, and we see the tapes, if you've never seen tapes of elderly people being abused, it's pretty rancid stuff to watch. They smack and beat the people. It's really, really, really sad. I just want you guys to go back to this video and just run the parallel of when he said, I had the power and so I used it. And that's exactly what we've been dealing with the entire time. And as long as we continue to call them law enforcers, we're going to have a problem. We have to get back to peace officers. We have to get back to peace officers.